2019 was full of hurdles for various parts of our world seeking greater democracy and political autonomy. Protests in Hong Kong continues and the UK is inching closer to realizing Brexit. Kim Dami sheds light on some of the major headline makers over the year.
The year of 2019 was full of movements to achieve sweeping change. What began over a controversial extradition bill in Hong Kong has now evolved into a broader, fearless movement for greater democratic freedom. After weeks of violent clashes between riot police and demonstrators, the bill that will allow for criminal suspects to be extradited to China was indefinitely scrapped in September. But that didn't stop the protesters' cries for greater democracy. Under the motto 5 demands, not one less, Hong Kong protesters are fighting for 4 other rights, including amnesty for arrested protesters and an independent inquiry into alleged police brutality. Violence has dragged on throughout the island. In the worst instance, an 18-year-old protester was shot in the chest with a live bullet by riot police. According to the Hong Kong daily Mingpao, police have arrested nearly 6,000 people between June and December, and roughly a third of them were students. Tensions are reaching fever pitch with escalating anti-Chinese sentiment, especially among young protesters who are less likely to identify themselves as Chinese. Other defining moments in the movement include the standoff between riot police and protesters at the barricaded campus of Hong Kong's Polytechnic University, the U.S. Congress passing a bill supporting Hong Kong, and last but not least, the local elections held last month. The vote saw a landslide victory for pro-democracy movements, with all 18 councils now controlled by pro-democracy councillors.
It's very likely that the Hong Kong protesters will keep doing what they do until next year when we have the Hong Kong Legislative Council elections. I suspect the Hong Kong protesters will use the same sort of tactics and methodology to try and garner more votes in the lead up to next year's elections.
2019 has also been full of ups and downs for the UK. The country has yet another new Brexit deadline, this time on January 31st, 2020. The British government, formed by the Conservative Party, has introduced a revised version of its withdrawal agreement bill that the UK will no longer be a part of the EU starting on January 31st. That's assuming the European Parliament also gives a green light. Even after its departure, it's not the end of the Brexit story. The UK will enter an 11-month transition period until December 31st next year. The UK's trading relationship with the EU will remain the same following the EU's rules, but this is the period when the UK and the EU will have to work on a free trade deal. But if a trade deal is not ready by the end of next year, that will mean checks and tariffs on British goods entering the EU. In fact, total UK trade last year came to more than $1.7 trillion, almost half of which was with the EU. So the transition period will be a crucial time for the UK to achieve a free trade deal. Johnson has clarified there will be no formal extension to the transition period. But one thing's for sure, many more negotiations and talks involving the Brexit drama are to be continued. Kim Dami, Arirang News.